This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Falcons analyst Jarvis Davis, Locked On Falcons host Aaron Freeman, and senior Falcons reporter Tori McElhaney. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we love to see a good crash out or two. We'll discuss. And how does the depth chart change? With number one out for a bit. We'll download on that. Also, no more underwear Olympics. We'll talk about that too. But first, JPJ out here knucking and bucking this past weekend, Jarvis. My goodness. So, lots to get into about that because the Falcons offense and defense and got to do a couple dust-ups during Sunday practice, including two involving James Pearce Jr. And like I said, there's a lot to break down in what happened and in Jeff Ulbricht's and Dwayne Ledford's responses to what happened. So let's just kind of break that down, take it nugget by nugget. On one series with the team's first team offense going against the second team defense, Pearce got into it. Ryan Newsel, Matthew Bergeron, Leonard Floyd came to Pearce's defense. One play later, then it was Pearce versus Caleb McGarry, and then Floyd had to break it up again. So let's start there, Jarvis. From the defensive perspective, what do you think about JPJ's scuffles and also about Floyd's focus on really showing that he had his young teammates back?
All this is team bonding. That's it. That's all it is. This is team bonding. Like, this is the perfect team bonding experience without having to go to a retreat and pay all this money and all this stuff to take everybody off campus. No, this is right here on the field, right where it's supposed to happen. This is just some good bonding because when you think about, I even asked James Pearce Jr. about Leonard Floyd and like the similar body types and all that stuff and kind of looking at his game. And he talked about, seeing and watching him and kind of seeing what he does. And when you see a moment where Leonard Floyd coming over there to help him out, like it just helps you get a full grasp of how he's bonding, how he's acclimating himself to the team. Because, everybody talk about the character concerns and all that stuff. I mean, that's all well and good, but he got a clean slate. So him figuring out a way to implement his style of play, how he wants to go, because all I took from that, as far as from James Pearce Jr. standpoint, is he likes to go hard. Like, and he don't care what year you are, like 7-year, 8-year vet. Oh, I'm just kind of trying to make it through camp so we can start playing games. Nah, man, I'm trying to get this work. That's what I gather from, because there are always guys like that in every locker room too. And I think that this is going to be an adjustment period because we've had so many conversations on this football party about guys that aren't necessarily guys you probably invite home for Christmas, you know what I'm saying? Or I use the analogy of I wouldn't let them date my daughter, you know what I'm saying? Like, when you bring guys like that onto the team, it's going to be an adjustment period because it ain't all cool. We all cool homeboys and everything while we out here on practice and all that stuff. We're all trying to get better. Yeah, that's cool. But, man, I'm trying to beat you. Like, and I don't want to be your friend right now. And we can probably be friends later. But right now, when we're on this field, we're going to battle. So I think overall, James Pearce Jr. is figuring out a way to bond with his teammates, and this is how it's going to happen. As he gets acclimated to the team.
Yeah. So Tori, it sounds like what Jarvis is saying is this is JPJ's form of like a kumbaya, let's be friends situation. But for you, again, just looking at it from the defensive perspective, I mean, what'd you think about him kind of getting in there, tussling it up, but also Floyd saying, "Hey, I got your back, young fella"?
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I know that like the prevailing comments from people is like, "Oh, you don't want to fight each other, like you don't want to fight your teammates." But to those people, I'm like, y'all very obviously haven't been around this beast we call football.
Yes.
Like, because this happens, right? Like, this happens at every level. This is nothing new. This is actually pretty par for the course. And I think something that is important to talk about is the fact of what Jeff Ulbricht said, and even something that I go back to a few days ago, what Jake Matthews said, where the onus was put on the defense over the last couple days of practice to bring the violence, bring the intensity up, like bring the passion. So when you ask guys to do that, when you open the door for them to do that, this is what happens. And I think this is just like incredibly natural. I think this makes total sense. I really love it. I love seeing that passion and that energy because I think, like, to Jarvis's point, like, you want some of these guys to go and show, like, hey, I'm not just gonna like roll over and we're not just gonna like go out here and like humdrum through it. No, like, we're bringing a certain level of passion. And I think even Jeff Ulbrich said yesterday when he was asked about it, he was like, yeah, like I challenge them to bring that violence. We're trying to establish a culture. We're trying to see
Yes.
what type of attacking style defense we can put in place. And the time to do that is right now. Now, do you want just fisticuffs flying all the time? No. But when things get heated, like, let them get at it a little bit. This is a violent game. Like, and as much as I think we try to get away from the violence of the game itself, it's like the core of this game at the end of the day is man versus man waylaying on each other. And there is strategy to that, but let's be real. This is a violent game. So let them kind of play around with that and find the lines. And you think about someone like a James Pearce Jr., he has to find the line with Caleb McGarry. He has to find the line with Matthew Bergeron. Like, and you don't find that line until you cross it. So I think like that's another part of it too. So I love it. You'll hear no complaints like from me. Now, if this is happening every single practice, and we're having to have and it's the same person, it's the same guys, and it's like, and we're having to have this conversation over and over again, then okay, then you address that differently. But for right now, have them go at it. That's you're setting an expectation. Have them go at it.
Yeah. And Free and Tori, I want to say, I'm not trying to overgeneralize, but let's keep it real. I always say one thing about guys is you guys will go at each other like you're trying to take the person's life, trying to take their soul. And then you'll just walk off the field and be like, want to go get a couple beers? I mean, it's just so true.
As a woman, I fully like, I hold grudges and I make no, like, if you do one thing to me, I'm not going to get coffee with you. Yeah, I'm not going to go and get coffee with you. But guys have a different brain. They can punch each other in the face and be like, all right, my guy, like,
exactly.
hang out.
I literally just got off the phone with a guy that one of my teammates, and we had a conversation about some stuff. And he was a guy that I had got into it with. I actually fought on the field, and we kind of locked up, you know, a little wrestling, you know, match, you know, off the field. So it's just that's what I'm talking about when we talk about James Pearce Jr. Like, this type of stuff right here is going to be things you're going to kind of refer back to and laugh. Like, oh man, you remember you try to come at your boy, you know what I'm saying? The first couple of days of practice. Right. Hey man, I remember it, and that's the reason why I'm sitting on 7 sacks with about 8 games to play. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the type of stuff that you like, oh man, they got me ready to go. So I think this is gonna be cool. I can't wait. I love team bonding. This is good team bonding. I expect more of it.
Yeah, Free. I'm interested to see what you think, because while this is not game action, if you will, and we're still a day away from the pads, at least we're starting to see kind of that intensity that shows you a little bit more of like that emotional motor that James Pearce Jr. has for this game, and kind of how having a guy like a Leonard Floyd, who's a veteran, but still young enough to be able to kind of connect with those younger guys to kind of see where he fits in, not just in terms of what he'll do on the field, but kind of that influence that goes even beyond.
Yeah, I think Tori nailed it, where it's just like, this is football. This is just par for the course when it comes to football. It's hot. You got guys, you know, trying to, you know, manhandle each other, you know, tempers will flare. And then, as you said, T, like, you know, then you get a splash of water, you calm down, and it's like, okay, like we're good. You know, we got to go back to work. I think back when I was like 11 years old, the first real fight I got into with my best friend, and like, yeah, we beefed for like a day, and then we were back to being best friends. After that, I remember in college, one of my best friends punched me in the face. Now, I was being a jerk about it, and so like I was doing some things that deserved to be punched in the face.
Somebody punched you, Freeman?
Oh, you don't have a punchable face, Free, so I'm struggling with that one.
That was just, you know, I was younger and, you know, more immature back in those days, you know. So like you gotta, you know, sometimes people got to check you, and so like when, you know, it's funny to me, like, Bergeron is always involved in these fights, and we talked about this last week where he's like, he's a hockey player. Like that's where he got his start. And it's like, of course, like he brings that hockey mentality to the football. It seems like every summer it's like, yes, the first fight will be started by Matthew Bergeron, or he will retaliate in whoever else starts the first fight. It's always involving him. I'm sure when we get to joint practices like that, one of those days of joint practices later this summer, it's just going to be nothing but fighting.
Yes.
And it's going to be, as Tori said, it's going to be counterproductive, right? That's going to be when it gets counterproductive, where it's just like everything turns into a scrap at that point in time. But I think in the meantime, you know, you got, as others have said, you got to kind of test the limits. You know, you like seeing Leonard Floyd in the defensive line sort of circle and show that camaraderie and that fellowship, I guess you could say. And you see the same thing. That's certainly something that you see for this offensive line and offensive lines across the league. And so it's not surprising when these sort of two tribes, I guess you could say, that are mortal enemies, but, you know, because of circumstances are forced to work together as a football team, offensive and defensive linemen, you know, these,
great point.
They get back into what they do, which is, you know, go at it constantly. And so I think this represents that. And as others have said, like, you know, it becomes a problem when it becomes consistent and counterproductive, where we have to stop practice and we have to slow things down. But like for the meantime, it's like, you know, as you know, I think Tori's saying what what was that movie Godzilla, where there's like, let them fight, you know, that's kind of the whole thing, where you have, you know, two monsters fighting it out in the trenches.
Love it. So let's go back to something that Jeff Ulbrich said. The DC said, quote, "We're trying to develop a culture, a style of play for sure. And part of that is the violence with which we play and aggression." Was JPJ's and this defense's play overall to start camp for you, Jarvis, the violence and aggressive you need to see as a prelude to maybe what we'll see in the regular season?
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, I even asked Ulbrich about this, like how do you teach fast? Is it more so scheme, or is it a man's mindset? And I thought he gave a very interesting answer. He talked about how it's a combination of both, right? So you have to, and a lot of times your scheme, and I even asked him after the press conference, because I wanted to kind of get some clarity on some stuff as far as what they were running last year. And when you have a two gap scheme, which is what I played in college, you know, hey, I'm coming out, extending my arms, I'm making sure, checking my gaps to make sure everything is all good. But when you have a scheme like Jeff Ulbrich and what he's trying to bring to the table, it's a one gap scheme. So meaning I'm going, like, I don't have to wait and see what's going on before I make a move, or once I recognize this run or pass, try to get off the block and disengage. And that's what you saw a lot of last year in Jimmy Late's scheme. So for me, I feel like just based off of what they're trying to run and the guys that they brought in, I think that combination is going to be very interesting. And I think that James Pearce Jr. is probably going to be the guy that kind of be the headliner for that, because he's long, lean, athletic, super fast. And you telling him, hey man, don't worry about that other gap over there. Just worry about this right here. This is your B gap, or this is your C gap. Go. That's all you're responsible for. And the ball coming to your area, roll. If it doesn't, go find it. You know, and I think that the less you have guys thinking out there, especially rookies, that means that's going to benefit you a lot from trying to get what you're trying to get accomplished.
Yeah, Tori, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that for me, I don't know exactly what this defense is yet. And I think that this is the part of camp that you try to figure that out. And it goes back to kind of what I was saying before about you're laying an expectation of who you want to be. If this is a defense that wants to dictate terms on their terms. And I think that is the biggest thing, that if I've gotten nothing from talking to these players and these coaches about this defense, like, it's not passive, it's aggressive. And I actually think that it showed up really naturally in someone like Mike Hughes. I know we're talking a lot about like the defensive line, but I thought Mike Hughes has been really impactful over the last couple days of practice with his ability to do what he can in a non-physical way, because they don't have the pads on. So a lot of these DBs are just kind of like, they have to be in the area, be in the right area to act almost like that they're going to make a play. And I think that Mike Hughes has done a really good job of being in certain spots to potentially make plays. I know he had a couple of punch outs on Saturday, which, you know, you love to see, but I don't know. I think if you're this defense, you can only go probably 55, 60% of like full speed. You don't have the pads on. There is no live tackling. Like a lot of what you do as a defense is like pigeonholed during this time because of the rules. And that's fine. Like you don't want to get people hurt in August. So I think that for Jeff Ulbrich, it's like, how do you still have this like violence and aggression without the natural inclination to physicality? And I think that's what they're trying to establish right now in terms of who they want to be. So that's kind of been my thought process when it comes to Jeff Ulbrich, this defense, and the culture of which he's trying to implement here.
Yeah, which Aaron is perfect when you think about also having them play a clean game, right? In the regular season, this kind of lines up with how do you get after the quarterback? How do you make sure that you're winning in the trenches, but without penalties, doing that, just playing a clean game? This is kind of that prelude to that too, mixing in and matching the violence and aggression at the right time and in the right way.
Yeah, and I think seeing this sort of, you know, aggressiveness or physicality or whatever you want to call it, I think it's a good sign for young players like James Pearce Jr. And obviously Jalen Walker has been nicked up a little bit, so we haven't really gotten the opportunity to see him as much these last couple of practices. But, you know, I think with those two guys in particular, you know, you see the physicality at the collegiate level, but like making that transition to the next level in the NFL is a completely different beast. And so like you see the speed and the athleticism that those guys bring potentially as pass rushers, but we've seen whether it's a Jared Verse or other some of these players that have come into the league and had immediate success, it has been more through power. Like, you know, I saw an interview where Teron Armstead, the former Saints left tackle and Dolphins left tackle, and they asked him, like, you know, who were the players that made you retire? And he basically was like, yeah, Jared Verse. Like, I'm glad I'm retired because I don't want to deal with that anymore. And sort of that ability to show that sort of aggressiveness and physicality that that you have to take your game to another level at the NFL level for that to be effective as a pass rusher and all these various things. I think seeing that early in this camp from James Pearson, hopefully we'll continue to see more of that from Jalen Walker, I think is a very positive sign to, you know, talking about a prelude to what we might see in the regular season.
Oh yeah. And that's, to me, that I think is the excitement as well, because you know that this is what you're hoping to see during the regular season. And think about this too, guys. It kind of wraps up in a bow what you guys talked about in terms of what Brick's mindset is, because he did go on to say, you're going to get agitated. And especially when you're playing really good defense, the offense is going to get very agitated. So you've got to anticipate punches being thrown, things being said, people getting pushed. In those moments, you got to thrive and not retaliate. And that's sort of from the book of Iron Sharpens Iron. Now, Dwayne Ledford, he had an opportunity to weigh in on the crash outs, rather. We will take that under further review. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, me and maybe some of my crew folks here from the Atlanta Football Party might be playing a little Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy in the past, need to get back to it, so this is kind of my call to action. And I just love how smooth the draft day experience is. It's fun. And also the league, when you run it through Yahoo, there's an easy setup. You got the great mobile app to complement it. And the Smack Talk, it just hits different on the message boards, if we're being honest. So to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. So stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/locked on. That's yahoofantasy.com/locked on NFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/locked on NFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. So Dwayne Ledford had some commentary as well on the tussles we saw Sunday. He said basically training camp practices are like quote unquote off-roading in a nice truck. He also went on to say, yeah, we had a couple of crashes today, meaning Sunday, of course. But the things about these guys, I know this. I know our locker room. I know who they are. I know the culture that we have here in this locker room. Those guys, they're going to shake it up. It's kind of like what we said. If both sides of the ball are playing hard, it's just going to make us on both sides better. Wouldn't you agree also, Tori, with Ledford's take on those crash outs in terms of the positive for the offense?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, the thing about it is that with this offensive line, because there's so much continuity from the last few years, I think that like it can be really easy to get into like a humdrum of it. And so I think the fact that I was actually talking to Rugiet about kind of the relationship between the offensive lineman and the defensive lineman, and to the point of what we're talking about how like the natural inclination is to hate each other, but you're on the same team, your teammates, you're trying to work on things together. And I think from this offensive line perspective, they're getting to see a lot of different looks because of the nature of how much rotation is actually happening across from them on the defensive line. They're seeing different pairings. They're seeing different body styles. They're seeing different groupings. And I think like because of that, that should only help these guys who have been playing together now for going on almost 3 years as a collective unit. And I mean, that doesn't really, I don't think like it's been talked about enough how like rare that is for an offensive line, regardless of, I think, whether it's high school, college, pro, how often can you say that a vast majority of a core five has played together for more than 2 years? Like that to me is like, I don't think that's being talked about enough as an asset for this team. So for I say all of that to say that like, okay, yes, I think that like what Dwayne Ledford is saying as well about kind of like the highs and the lows of camp and things getting heated and not heated. I think it makes total sense because of kind of everything that I said.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great point because Aaron, if you're not careful as an O-line, you can think to yourself, okay, we got this because we've been together and we've been having this each and every year. But ultimately speaking, you can't relax. Like you still need to come in as aggressive, feeling like you have something to prove, just like the D-line does. So yeah, I think Tori makes a great point about the fact that there's still something for them to fight for. And it could be individually and collectively, or individually even as collectively, because we talked about Lindstrom. Everyone's kind of anointing you as the best in the business at right guard. You still got to show and prove. And Caleb McGarry, everyone's looking to see, okay, will your pass pro ever kind of get into the ballpark of your run pro? Matthew Bergeron, everyone's saying, okay, third year, you're taking a leap for what we're doing. And Jake Matthews, of course, it's the consistency. And we all know about Ryan Newsel and, hey, just be solid. But even in those spaces where there are expectations for them, like this kind of thing, I think is a good look for them because it does help to make not just the defense better, but it gives the offensive line the notion that, hey, you can't just sit back and rest on your laurels either, because there will be some defenses that you come up on very early in the season that are going to expect you to be able to perform at a high level out of the gate.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, what Tori's talking about, is complacency. You don't want this offensive line to get complacent because of that continuity and be like, yeah, we got this. We've done this all before. And you just kind of go through the motions. And I think, T, you nailed it in the sense of, everything that they do now is part of preparation for what's going to happen during the regular season. And, Vita Vea is coming to town, week 1. Hassan Reddick is we'll see if Hassan Reddick decides he wants to play football this year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But, then you have the Minnesota Vikings defensive line that, did work against the Falcons last time. And they've added, 2 big time D tackles that are veteran players in Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, up front. And so those are going to be some of the challenges that you're going to face right off the bat in the NFL this upcoming regular season. And you want this offensive line to be challenged in the meantime. And, your worries of, and again, I think what Dwayne Ledford's talking about, what you and Tori are talking about, is like you feel good about this offensive line not necessarily being complacent because of some of these challenges. But I think ultimately, having a lot of these young guys on the defensive side of the ball that are looking to prove themselves, causes this offensive line to kind of have to be like, okay, these young guys are trying to show us up. We're not going to let them do that. And that just, as they say, iron sharpens iron, that sort of thing. And so I think ultimately this, these are what we're talking about with these challenges and these back and forths does help both sides of the ball get better and prepare for the regular season.
And I think that it was kind of interesting that James Pearce Jr. got into it with Ryan Newsel, right? Because nobody would really expect something like that an edge player would get into it with a center, because he's the new guy. Essentially, sure. I mean, he's been around the block, as far as for 5 years, and and earned himself a contract coming from an undrafted free agent, which is that is a fascinating story. I don't care what anyone says. That is so awesome that you can be able to get to that point. And I think that. And Terry even pointed this out yesterday in his presser. He's saying like how that goes. It speaks to Dwayne Ledford and the system and having him in there and allowing him to develop, from a roster building standpoint and the coaching standpoint, marrying those two together, being on the same page about what a player is. And because I thought it was just kind of interesting that they never brought in a veteran guy, basically a breaks in case of the emergency type guy. They said, hey man, Ryan Newsel is our guy. We know we're not gonna be able to play Drew, and Newsel is our guy. We trust Dwayne Ledford's teaching, and I trust my evaluation on what he is as a player and what he can be for this team. So I think for those reasons, I don't see any complacency going on because it's something new. It's something fresh, right? Because if Drew would have come back, we're like, oh, okay, yeah, Drew got paid. Chris got paid, Caleb Gary trying to play for a contract. Jake still trying to, be consistent and all that stuff. But when you bring a new person right there smack dab in the middle of your lineup, it's like, all right, we got to make sure Newsel, okay, I got to make sure I'm here. I may even overcompensate in the beginning of the season, so I can make sure he's good before I go up to that second level, right? So I think that continuity that they have to build with him right there in the middle, that's going to keep them abreast of not resting on their laurels, so to speak.
Yeah. So I think, Tori, and this is just kind of a fun kind of close out to that conversation. Not that we didn't know James Pearce Jr. had a little dog in him, don't get me wrong. But I don't think we've ever actually called him out on our show saying, hey, he's one of those dogs. But I think he kind of showed us, and no pun intended, but I think he kind of showed us that edge that we need to see. But low key, you do kind of ask a question about like a Ryan Newsel, because we've never had a question about Matthew Bergeron have some dog in him too. But I think this kind of shows, okay, Ryan Newsel, I see you.
Ryan Newsel is so funny because I go back to my conversation with Rook yesterday, and I specifically asked him, I was like, who on the offensive line makes you better? Like when you show up to practice and you're going mano-a-mano with somebody, like who makes you better? And he's like, well, of course you have like Chris is the best guard in the league, and Matthew Bergeron's really great. He was like, but Ryan Newsel, he called him stump-like. He was like, he's not
perfect.
It was honestly, if someone called me a stump, like I would probably burst into tears. But if you're a center in a professional league, like someone calling you a stump is probably the best compliment that you can get. Like, because, and then I we talked to Kirk Cousins yesterday as well, and I asked him kind of, hey, Rook just said that Ryan Newsel is a stump. Like, would you agree? And he said, and he was like, I played with a lot of centers, and a big part of what you look for is that they're not being moved and that they're not coming back into the lap or under the feet of the quarterback. And he was like, those few games that he was playing with Ryan Newsel, more than a few games, like 8-9 games that he was playing with Ryan Newsel, he was like, he was like, people don't give him enough credit for his athleticism. He was like, you saw that sideline to sideline speed on that 1 second getting ready, like down against Tampa Bay, and to where they could spike the ball with 1 second to ultimately go on and win that game. But he was like, he also is kind of a bit immovable sometimes, and he's not being pushed back into the pocket too terribly often. And I think like Kirk's played with a lot of centers before. Like, talk about Kirk however you want to, but this is a guy who's been in the league for 15 some odd years. Like, he's played with a lot of guys. So the fact that he's saying this about a undrafted free agent who is now having the opportunity to go and be a starting center, and he's like, yeah, he is stump-like. Like, I think that bodes well for Ryan Newsome and where he is in his career right now.
And I think that I thought another thing that Terry said that was interesting. He's like, talk about how competitive he is, right? He can play you in badminton, he's going to win. He can play you in NCAA college football, he's going to win. When you have that type of mindset, you take it to everywhere. You don't have to be coached. Like, you don't have to coach it. Like, I need you guys to be aggressive. Nope, you don't have to worry about that. And then he's able to do that and have such a just calm type demeanor. Like, it's so cool to kind of see guys like that turn that switch on. So for me, I think that a dog comes in different forms, right? But there's one trait that you look for in that dog, and he has that, and that's just you just compete all the freaking time, and I think that Ryan Newsome falls into that category.
Yeah, we sat here all offseason being like, I don't know. Is Ryan Newsome the answer to the Falcons center situation? And like, as we get closer to the season, it's like, okay, like I'm starting to believe that maybe Ryan Newsome is the answer. So I think as we, as they stack days, I'm using all the cliches, as they stack days.
That's a great one.
I was like, where are we at?
About Ryan Newsome and Tori mentioning the term of endearment, calling him a stump. You're right. I've never heard anybody call someone a stump, anything related to a stump, and be a positive way of describing them. A fire hydrant is probably a little bit more of what you kind of hear, that sort of low center of mass. But like, all these things are just like building towards, like, you get to week one. And again, going back to that Vita Vea conversation, like, you're going to get tested. We're going to find out September 7th, like, all right, Ryan Newsome, block this 350-pound guy.
You can dance like a bear.
You're hoping that stump trips up that dancing bear, I guess you could say. So I think we're getting closer to the point where we won't be asking these questions and wondering, it's like, is Ryan Newsome the answer and all that stuff. So I think all these things are moving in that direction, and all these things that are coming out of camp are good signs for the future.
Yeah, I would say good signs. Yeah, definitely. I think, to your point, Free, we took one step closer to feeling a comfort level and a confidence about Ryan Newsome. Now, how do we feel comfort level about the depth chart change? Maybe with number one out for a bit. We'll discuss that when we run it back. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Gametime. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Well, live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling? Trying to find that best deal? Well, Gametime Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy? The app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. I can tell you personally that it truly is a user-friendly app, and I can tell you personally that you will get some good last-minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed with Gametime. So, Aaron, in the Falcons' first practice of training camp, and we always hate when this happens, Darnell Mooney dove for a deep pass, ended up walking off the field with the trainer, helmet in hand, didn't return. On Friday, the Falcons signed free agent wide receiver DJ Chark, who had most recently played for the Chargers, but Falcons assistant GM Kyle Smith did say that those two things are independent of one another. So we'll kind of keep that in mind. So let's start with the signing, since it is independent of Darnell Mooney's injury, and we have a little bit more to talk about to kind of get into where the Falcons go from there. What are your thoughts about Chark getting signed by the Falcons?
Yeah, and we knew that the Falcons were bringing in wide receivers before that first practice to work out on Friday. So I think, what Kyle Smith is getting at is like the team had already identified, hey, we need to maybe shore up some of our wide receiver depth.
Yes.
And then, Mooney getting hurt doesn't help that issue at that point in time. So if they were just like, well, should we sign a wide? I think at that point it was like, yes, we should definitely sign a wide receiver at this point in time. But I think with Chark, he gives you a veteran presence, because when you look at this Falcons wide receiver room, you love Darnell Mooney, you love Drake London. Ray McCloud was very solid for this team last year. Kadero Hodge has been a valuable sort of depth piece. And then after that point, you're just kind of looking at this wide receiver room and you're just like, okay, who else can we trust to kind of step into a game and perform? And you have, it's not because you lack talent, but you just don't have any proven options. And I think with DJ Chark, you have a guy that's been in the league since 2018, was a high round pick, had a 1,000-yard season back in his past, then dealt with some injuries and various things, has been a solid role player and depth piece for multiple teams over the last couple of years, including the Chargers most recently, where, he was hanging out with Easton Stick, who apparently put in a good word for him to get him this workout. I think Chark brings what you like that Chark brings is the speed, right? He ran a 4.35 coming out of LSU. Watching some of his games the last couple of years, I don't know if he can still clock a 4.35, but he's still like probably running in the 4.4s. And that speed element, particularly with how productive he has been as a vertical threat in the NFL, adds a different element, particularly in light of Mooney, who was your primary, sort of vertical threat in your offense. And having another guy alongside Mooney, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, all these other guys that also have that verticality and it can bring that to the offense, a more proven option in DJ Chark, I think makes a lot of sense from a depth standpoint with this Falcon team. And obviously in the meantime, as he gets work and gets integrated in this offense, the potential for him to potentially climb up the depth chart a little bit more and maybe be in the mix to be one of those guys that actually gets on the field come, the regular season and make this roster. I think things are pointing in the right direction. So I think he has a valuable skill set that he can to this team, add some experience, some depth, give some of these backup quarterbacks like Easton Stick and Emory Jones, who are probably going to get 99% of the snaps in the preseason. Somebody who you can trust to go out there and catch the football in some of these preseason games. So we're not watching, a completely non-functional Falcons offense, in some of these preseason games with all these sort of backing guys that you don't always can trust to catch the football and operate the offense. And you can't really evaluate if you're constantly having 3 and outs and punting the ball on the preseason game, but we'll see.
Well, Free, at least you didn't say 0.5% chance of in the other direction. At least you gave it a 1% chance of who we know we want to see take the field and who we hope will take the field. But yeah, like you said too, the DJ Chark signing was already in the works, workout having taken place for the Tiger, go Tigers. So Jarvis, what do you think about that signing of another one of those speedsters out of LSU who, like I said, had recently played for the Chargers and, as Free mentioned, had an advocate with the Falcons for him joining the team?
It was interesting once I saw the news. I kind of thought back to a conversation Aaron and I had on Locked On Falcons, and we was like, "Oh yeah, Chris Blair was the first sub when Darnell Mooney came down." I was like, when I thought about it back then, I was like, oh, "Okay, yeah, whatever." Darnell Mooney, he gonna be all right. He'll be good. But when you think about it, it's just like Chris Blair is the first sub that you kept bringing it to the table when Darnell Mooney goes out. No, that's not good. Somebody, Chris, don't get me wrong, no shade towards Chris Blair. He's a fine player, young guy, kind of been borderline roster, practice squad type guy. But yeah, with the expectations of this offense and what they're trying to do, they need somebody that's been there, done that. And DJ Chark is just that. And he's a guy that, like, when I saw him on the field yesterday, I was like, oh my gosh, man, got some size. Like, you see somebody in person for the first time, you're like, oh, okay, you kind of take it in. I'm like, yeah, you understand why he was a second round draft pick out of LSU back in 2018. So for me, I think it makes all the sense in the world. and I'll be interested to see. And he's kind of like an Eddie Goldman type too, right? Because he talked about how, he was on the verge of kind of sitting down, like retiring and hanging it up, and gave a really good anecdote about, his daughter, who's only 5 years old, and she's been in like 6 cities already. I was like, man, I totally get it, bro. From a father's perspective. So I think it's a matter of him giving the Falcons what they need in this moment. And I'll be interested to see, can he stick around? Because I think a guy like that, with what he brings to the table and in this offense and what the quarterback does well, is throw a deep ball. And if you can get a guy like that to kind of match that with a guy like that who has that type of speed, who can kind of take the top off, so to speak, I think it'll be a beautiful marriage. And I'll be interested to see if he's able to stick around.
Yeah. I like what he brings to the table. And hey, if he's able to, and you don't know that he'll necessarily do anything for special teams, but of course my mind went to that as well. Like, you got yourself a speedster, who knows where you might be able to, or how you may be able to insert him there as well, Tori. But for you, what did you like about that Chark signing?
So kind of beyond what Free and Jarvis have already stated, which I agreed with everything, there's this one piece that I always go back to when it comes to like Zac Robinson's offense, and something he's talked about in terms of like what depth looks like. And a lot of what he said is like having these like clones almost of players, like starters, like your backups have a clone for your first string, your second string. So kind of just getting guys with similar types of upside, and similar types of play styles, so that, to your point, there's not a huge discern in what they're trying to do offensively, scheme wise. So I do think that it makes sense. I understood why people automatically put the connection of Darnell Mooney got hurt. He's the guy that is your vertical threat. And they went and signed someone who is a speedy vertical threat. Like, so I understood that, because it did feel very clone-like. But the problem in that is like that already, to Kyle Smith's point, that was already something that I think they were noting. I think that was already something that they were pinpointing, because they were looking at their roster and looking at their group of receiver. And it's like, if something did happen to Darnell Mooney, do you have a clone for him? Because I do feel like you have kind of a similar body type with Chris Blair and Drake London. Not saying that Chris Blair is Drake London. I'm just kind of saying from the scope of where you would want to put him. You kind of have some of these particular spots, but I didn't necessarily feel like if Darnell Mooney went down, you had someone who could kind of be that same type of look for a player. And I do think that there is something to be said about DJ Chark, and that he could potentially play that clone-like role for a Darnell Mooney. So all of that to say, I'm not worried about Darnell Mooney right now at all. I think that at this point in time, you are overly cautious about everything. And so I don't think I don't make that connection immediately. And I know like Kyle Smith kind of bunked that when he talked about it. But I do think that there is something to be said about having pieces of depth that mimic what your starters can do.
Yeah. And Free, just as Tori mentioned, in terms of the injury for Darnell Mooney, going to be out for a couple of weeks. She's not super concerned about it. And I don't think it is something that seems to be a concern unless, and we don't know this, by the way, so please, everybody hear the disclaimer. We don't know yet if that is the same shoulder that he injured late last season. We pray that it's not the same, like a re-injury or a lingering injury that we'll still be having a conversation about down the road. But do you have any concerns about that particular injury in terms of it lingering or being something that we need to, that's going to rear its head during the regular season?
Not currently. I mean, if we get to September 3rd and that injury report comes out and it says Darnell Mooney did not practice, shoulder in parentheses, then I will be concerned about it at that point in time. But I think for the time being, giving him the next 5+ weeks to kind of rest and heal up, as we know, he wasn't going to play in the preseason, regardless of whether he was, doing jumping jacks and backflips and stuff, like as healthy as he could possibly be. So, like, it's one of those things where it's like, just give him the time. We obviously all the practice time he misses is practice time and opportunities to continue working on the rapport that he's developing with Michael Penix. So that is a concern at this point in time. But, Darnell Mooney can get open, so I'm not too worried about. He's going to be fine getting open. I guess the question is just going to be: is Michael Penix going to consistently get him the ball when he gets those opportunities? And so that's a Michael Penix problem. I don't think that's going to be a Darnell Mooney problem once we get to the games and whatnot. So it's not something I'm too concerned about at this point in time. But a month from now, if we're hearing, Darnell Mooney has yet to come back to practice, even on a limited basis, then it's like, is this going to be a thing when a month before it's not currently a thing? So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned because it's July 28th. We still had preseason hadn't even started yet. So I think once we get to the preseason games and we still see him kind of lingering around on the sidelines, you probably should start getting concerned. I think this is one of those deals where they're going to be extremely cautious early on because that's a lot. I think we just, heard about David Walker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a guy who I really like, coming out as a edge prospect. He just found out he got a torn ACL. Like when things get going, these first few days, somebody going to catch a season-ending injury. And I think that, given whatever is going on with Darnell Mooney at this moment, they're going to use extreme caution, and I have no issue with that. So, I'm not concerned right now.
Yeah, I think you guys all hit it on the head. There's enough depth there, and it's early enough for Darnell Mooney to recover and be ready 100% to go once the regular season starts. And, we don't want to kind of go down that road of like putting that bad juju out there. So we'll just keep the positive thoughts out there on Darnell Mooney and really this wide receiver room, including, or I will call it the pass catching room, because there's some positive vibes coming out about one of the pass catchers and whether or not we're really going to see 2.0 of what we saw for his year one. So Terry Fontenot spoke Sunday on the confidence he has in Kyle Pitts, saying he's had some challenges, but he's got the right mindset, really wants to be the best he can for us. And the early returns are that KP is having a good start to camp. He's almost exclusively, in fact, working in that slot or wide out. The reason I mention that is because we go back to that conversation we always have about that Pro Bowl rookie season. Well, 63% of the snaps in the slot or as a wide receiver. So that said, do you think that maybe Zac Robinson is kind of giving us a sneak peek into what it'll take to see the rebirth of 8?
I hope so. Going back to the conversation we were having, it's like it's July 28th, and so it's just like you want to be encouraged by what you see at this stage in the summer, but can anybody remember what happened on July 28th last year? Not really, because at the end of the day, all that really matters is what happens in the regular season. So hopefully we'll look back at this, in 4 or 5 months where Kyle Pitts is in the midst of a Pro Bowl type of season. We're like, you know what? It all began way back at the end of July. We could see the through line in the path there. But so it's encouraging. It's optimistic. We've been encouraged and optimistic about Kyle Pitts during previous summers, and the last couple of years, it hasn't really translated to a consistent encouragement and optimism during the regular season. You get the flashes, but it's been, far too much of a roller coaster these last couple of years. So this is basically my stance is like, I'm going to buy back into it because what else am I going to do at this? It's the last chance we're going to have potentially to buy into Kyle Pitts stock at this stage, because if it doesn't work this year, then he won't be back next year. And that's going to be it. So, every time I try to get out, they pull me back and back in. So I'm right back in. That's basically it.
Jarvis, I have a feeling that you're feeling the same way. Like, you know what? I'm going to be optimistic. It is only July 28th. And I saw one thing, and of course, I'm in my Jarvis voice. I saw one thing at training camp for Kyle Pitts that made me say, "Yeah, this is it." The reintroduction of Kyle Pitts.
I mean, The dude just seems relaxed. Like if you ask me to give a Jarvis tackle, like his after practice Thursday, I think it was Thursday, and he was just talking. He was just so at ease and calm, and I feel like that matters a whole lot when you talk about a player that has not been able to quite get it right, so to speak, on a consistent basis, because everything has to be going right in order for players to have success on the field, right? Whether it's at home, the mentals, the kids, all that stuff, wife, significant other, whatever, like all those things have to be kind of rolling in order for them to be able to have success, because it's really hard to compartmentalize everything. I mean, I know, granted, like athletes are able to do that, right? But there still has to be an element of safety in where you are in life. And it feels like Kyle is there. He's there. And I think that whatever happens on the field is going to be a product of that. So if you're asking me for one reason why he might have some success this year, I feel like that might be it, because, y'all know how I felt about Kyle Pitts as a player. It's just, I mean, my expectations are very low, but I feel like the growth, how mature he sounded, and just answering the questions and just being up there and talking about different things, I feel like that's going to help him kind of put things in perspective on the field.
Yeah. And Tori, I mean, by all accounts, he's having a solid start to the camp. Good to see him out there. But do you feel like, and there may be something you've seen, or just maybe a feeling because you cover him so closely, that maybe this is finally that season where we're going to see the rebirth, the reintroduction of that Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, I think that like Free and Jarvis both make a good point. Like, I'm not going to sit here and proclaim to the masses that Kyle Pitts is back. Like, that's not what I'm going to sit here and do right now. And I don't think that like anyone in the Falcons organization should not do that. Like, because I think that like we felt this way before. You felt, to Free's point, you have felt this way about Kyle Pitts before, and that first rookie year debut has not manifested in the years since. My biggest thing, and this is something that I talked to Robert Mays of the Athletic Football Show on our podcast for Atlanta Falcons Podcast Network, literally yesterday. We had this conversation about what expectations should be like for Kyle Pitts in year 5. And my main point of every conversation that I have with about Kyle Pitts is I do think that Zac Robinson and how Zac Robinson views Kyle Pitts is a direct marker of what that production and expectation of production should look like. Because at the end of the day, Bijan Robinson is going to get his hands on the football more than anyone else on this offensive roster.
True.
That Drake London is going to get the ball. That Darnell Mooney is going to get the ball. There are a lot of mouths to feed within this offense. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's fair to say that we're going to have this explosion of Kyle Pitts in this year, because that means that fundamentally, if you are only throwing the ball a handful number of times, you're telling me you're not going to throw it to Drake London? You're telling me you're not going to throw it to Darnell Mooney? Like, I think the expectation should be that you go into the season and you think that Kyle Pitts is going to get 3 or 4 targets a game. What he does with that, how open he is, how many yards after catch he has, like all of that can be up for debate. But I think that realistically, you're looking at 3, 4, 5 targets per game for Kyle Pitts within this offensive structure and system. The problem in that is that we're talking about a number 4 overall pick, and that's where it's hard to get past that, because you're only utilizing this number 4 overall pick 3 or 4 times a game. Like that's a failure. That's a failure. Yes. And it's like we have to rewrite our brain. Like, we have to think about Kyle Pitts in this offense differently, because I don't think that he's going to get 8 targets a game. Like, I just don't. And like, you kind of have to be okay with that. And if you're not okay with that, well, this is the 5th year. Who knows what's going to happen thereafter? But I think we have to reframe how we talk about Kyle Pitts within this offense and kind of what he is for it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And same thing Tori, like we're having this conversation about Kyle Pitts and kind of the nuances of it, but the conversation never goes away by virtue of that number 4 selection in the draft. Same thing with Kirk Cousins. The conversation isn't going away because the $200 million contract happened and it's still looming. So, of course, came up Sunday, and it's something that you talked about in a piece that you wrote on AtlantaFalcons.com. You guys definitely make sure you check that out, because you asked a direct question of Terry Fontenot on where the organization's stance is, and is it the same as it was on Cousins earlier this year?
Yeah, I wanted to, I know there were some people that were kind of not pleased with me that I did ask that question, because like, why are we still talking about Kirk Cousins? It's dead, it's buried, like all that kind of stuff. But I don't think so. We have not talked to Terry Fontenot since after the draft. There is a lot that changes now that 53-man roster cut downs are approaching. Now that injuries are happening, now that the season is looming, like there are circumstances that change.
Yeah.
Point blank period, just because of the calendar and just because of the level of risk that you run into once people put the pads on. And so I felt the need. This is the only time we're going to get to talk to Terry until the end of the season. So I wanted to give him the opportunity to answer that question. The organization since January has stated that they feel comfortable with Kirk Cousins as the backup to Michael Penix Jr. Things have changed since, and things are going to change during the season. So does the organization still have that same thought? Is that still the same feeling they have about Kirk Cousins? Or does it evolve because a season does and injuries happen and cut downs happen? And I don't want to read a lot into this, but I'm going to, because that's my job. I think the fact that I presented to him, is the organization's stance on Kirk Cousins still the same as it was in January and every single time that y'all have spoken? And he did not say yes. I went through his answer. He did not say, yes, our stance as an organization is the same as it's been since January. That is not something that came out of his mouth. What came out of his mouth is Kirk is the ultimate professional, and he is doing everything right, and he is showing up, and he is working hard, and we'll see kind of what happens. That is different than what it was every other time we have talked to Terry Fontenot to this point. So, to me, I don't want to just be like, oh, the Falcons are getting ready to trade Kirk Cousins. That's not what I want you to take from this. It's just that I do feel like there is more clarity in the fact that the Falcons are very much keeping their eyes on everything that's going on with the 31 other teams in this league. And go ahead, Tenitra.
No, Tori, I'm just co-signing. Finish up.
And so I just think I think we needed that answer. Like we needed to know that, because let's say we get a month down the road and the Falcons are packaging all this different stuff and moving stuff around, and we're having this big conversation about moving Kirk off the roster. We need to be able to point back to this conversation where Terry did not say that the organization's stance is still the same. So for all the people coming at me, like there was a reason why I asked the question, and it was a reason why I wanted to know. Right. So come at me, but I have there's methods for the madness. I swear.
Well, I'm gonna say don't come for her.
Because I'm not just asking about Kirk Cousins just to stir the pot and keep a dead conversation going. No, this is a multi-million-dollar investment. That's your backup quarterback. What do you mean? I'm gonna ask about it.
And Tori, did we not say? Oh, just real quick, Jarvis. Did we not say? And we've been saying this actually for a while now, that the conversation is not going to go away for as long as he's an Atlanta Falcon. We're not going to sensationalize it, but Justin Fields' dislocated toe happened, and so it was the first kind of moment where you had to say, okay, we got to start having that conversation about what it looks like. So while you didn't go, and of course you did it in the appropriate journalistic way. You didn't go and say, hey, Terry, Justin Fields has a dislocated toe, and they, he might be worse.
Carted him off.
Exactly. Right. You didn't go there. Right. But it was a nuanced question where the rest of us know it has to be asked, because like you said, we won't have an opportunity as the media to talk to Terry Fontenot about this again. And even this morning, while we're preparing for this show, and again, different position, Jarvis, but just to make the point, David Walker's done for the season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they've lost their rookie edge rusher. These things are happening moment by moment by moment as training camps are really starting to get underway. So yes, the question was valid because that's going to bring it back to the lexicon, the fact that we are in practices, about to get in practices with ads, and his name is about to start coming up because unfortunately, no negativity, no ill will, but some quarterback is gone. Some QB1 is going to go down. And this question needed to be brought up. So go ahead, Jarvis.
No, I was just going to kind of piggyback off what you're saying. Like, yeah, this is everybody and their mama when Justin Fields was down. Whoop, better get it ready. And I was one of them. I was leading the charge. I'm like, hey, Terry, hope you paid your cell phone bill. You about to get a phone call, Jack. Like, everybody, like, and I even said, like, Terry Fontenot's phone number is going to be dialed if any starting quarterback goes down. Come on, any, because he's the best backup quarterback in the NFL, and he's paid as such. So when you like, that's why it was a beautiful question. I love the way you worded it in Terry Fontenot fashion. The politician that he is, he answered it just like a Terry Fontenot would. So I think people need to understand, like, this is not normal for a guy to be paid this type of money and be a backup quarterback. This doesn't happen. Like, this man is eating up a lot of your salary cap, like Tori brought up, where it was like 14%. Like, those are the type of things that don't normally happen. And I was having a conversation with another member of the media. You all know it. Man ain't gonna put his name out there, you know what I'm saying? Because I don't know if he won his business out there in the street. But he's saying, like, the Terry Fontenot is going to probably stumble into probably the best draft pick that he's ever had. And it's going to work out perfectly. Like, he went from, oh my gosh, why did you sign this old quarterback, to, oh my gosh, you got the quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years, right? So when you think about it from that aspect, it's just like, yeah, it's not crazy to think that Kirk Cousins can be off this roster 3 weeks from now. That's not crazy. So I think that, him saying he's open to whatever the situation is, and we're going to try to work things out and do what he do. Kirk is just being a great all-around person. So, yeah, he going to praise Kirk because he still got no trade clause, too. So, hey, man, this is weird. This is not weird. Normal. So all these different factors add up to, Tori, thank you for asking that doggone question.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll just ask, who's giving you this heat, Tori? Is this coming from Twitter? Is it Twitter is giving you all this heat? Okay. That explains it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Twitter is right here.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
He's like, I know.
Yeah. You're familiar with that keyboard courage that people have. Yeah. But it just kind of tells you that people don't really know what they're talking about, because I saw somebody say something like, oh yeah, because for national media purposes, Tori covers the Falcons. She works for the Falcons. She's invested in making sure we know what the storylines are for the Falcons that actually matter. And like it or not, Kirk Cousins storyline, as we are getting into training camp and preseason, headed into the regular season, it matters. And what Jarvis said matters too. Like, yes, at the top of the food chain for both Kirk Cousins and for teams that would be interested, probably those that are contenders. But real talk, there are going to be some teams that are in the middle and they kind of don't know if they're buyers or sellers, contenders or pretenders. They're going to go after him too. So 2/3 of the league is probably, keeping their eyes looking kind of over their shoulders, like in case they've got to keep Terry Fontenot on speed dial, because we saw it, maybe not so much in 24, but 23, the struggle was real. I mean, the Cleveland Browns went through 5 quarterbacks. The struggle was real. I believe it was maybe like 3/4 of the league at some point had to use a quarterback other than the QB1 they started the league, the season with. So trust and believe the Kirk Cousins story. It's going to have relevance for Atlanta until it doesn't. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked on Falcons with Aaron and his frequent guest analyst Jarvis as your next listen, and check out some of Tori's work at atlantafalcons.com. See you next time.